This is part 3 of Val's book. I love to play outdoors. We had a street full of kids. Almost every house in the neighborhood had a family. We had a big grass island in the middle of our widened street where we played Red Rover, send Sally right over, or whoever, football, tag, and many games we made up using the 100 by 20-yard strip of grass. Since most of the families knew each other, the kids used the entire block for games of hide and seek, cowboys and Indians, and army. My parents didn't know English, so I probably picked it up on the street, since all I spoke at home was our native Latvian language. I was 5 years old when I started school, which was walking distance from home. A block and a half away, I walked, skateboarded, and sometimes rode my bike down to school. The best part of school was recess, and this would be the theme throughout my school years because I enjoyed physical activity. My kindergarten, 6th grade years were normal in the white upper middle class neighborhood. Our tiny house must have been the caretaker's house compared to the huge 3-story Victorian houses surrounding us. I do recall one unusual event related to elementary school, and that had to do with Mr. Niebauer, my 6th grade teacher. He was a cool teacher, a former safety for a professional football team. Once when we were out playing flag football at recess, I asked him why I had a side ache. His answer was, "You're out of shape." It's funny some of the things that we remember. Anyway, years later, I read in the local newspaper that Mr. Niebauer's wife had mysteriously died in the kitchen of a knife wound. Mr. Niebauer claimed she had accidentally fallen on the knife, but the court ruled it murder and he was sent to prison. For those old enough to remember the TV series Alfred Hitchcock Presents in those days, well, he could have taken some pointers because many of the shows were about how to get rid of your wife or husband. On second thought, in most of the endings, the murderer did get caught, so maybe he was a frequent viewer. The parents and the house I grew up in, when I graduated from middle school, which was grades 7 through 9, life became very challenging. It's as if I had been happily unconscious and now had to start facing myself. The seeker within me was born. It all started, what was the meaning of life? Who am I? What am I doing here? What about God? These and many other questions began to annoy me and make my life miserable. It really was the most despondent time of my life, except for the breakups of my 3 marriages, which were times of woeful heartbreak. There was no relief from this plaguing feeling of emptiness and fear for at least 2 years during 7th and 8th grades. The only relief was television. In the evening and on weekends, I could get lost in shows like Rawhide, Wagon Train, Maverick, and other westerns that were so popular during the 1950s and 1960s. The other form of relief came the moment my 7th grade PE teacher saw me shoot a left-handed layup in class. I was right-handed, and most kids could not shoot with their offhand. He asked me to go out for the basketball team, and from then on, sports were a distraction from my distress. My dad put up a basketball hoop on our garage in the backyard, which was offset and way in the back. My mother's garden was all around, so I didn't dribble as much as practice shooting. Her clothesline was also an obstacle which I had to shoot over. Therefore, my shots were high-arching to make them over the line. When I played in games, I was known for high-arching 15 to 20-foot jump shots and very accurate. We won the league championship during my junior and senior years in high school, and I was first team all-league my senior year. I was not an academic in high school, but got by with mostly B's and C's. My favorite times were the summer of 1967 and the next year, which was my senior year in high school. During that time, I bought my first car, which was a silver 1963 Corvair convertible with red bucket seats, and found a cool girlfriend who I smoked marijuana with and drove up the 30 miles to San Francisco to see bands like Jefferson Airplane, Santana, and Janis Joplin and the Big Brother Holding Company. My parents still heard from Elliot once in a while, and between my senior year in high school and the freshman year of junior college, he made an inquiry as to if their son wanted to do surveillance off the books. My parents had done such a good job that he thought I may have inherited some skills from them. They were recruiting the youth here primarily. In the late 1960s, instead of terminating their MK Ultra mind control experiments, the CIA shifted its programs from public institutions to private cult-type groups. It was the heyday for groups like the Moonies, Hare Krishna, and Transcendental Meditation. My assignment would eventually run the gamut of 3 spiritual groups: Self-Realization Fellowship, Scientology, and Eckankar. I tried Scientology for a short-lived 6 months. Their first course was a communications course that was rather interesting. We would sit across from another person and practice communication drills, progressing from just staring at each other for 15 to 20 minutes to various dialogues with the intent of invoking a particular response in our partner. For example, in one drill, I would be the protagonist and try to make my partner laugh, get mad, or solicit any response I could by making faces or saying outlandish things just to get a response. My partner would learn to remain calm and collected. The exercises would progress into more complicated interactions. L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, took much of his material from the CIA handbook. This was good practice, so I finished the course and went on to purchase the next course, which cost $500. I don't remember where I got the money, but it was a lot for those days. My CIA handler never indicated any allowance for expenses or salary. The surveillance I was involved in was totally voluntary and off the books. At the same time, it seemed like a great adventure as I would prepare monthly reports on what I had witnessed. My parents were the only ones who knew what I was involved in. It came with a money-back guarantee, so I took the chance. In the first couple of weeks, I didn't like the way it was going, so I asked for my money back. They insisted that something negative from my past had been activated and I needed auditing to clear it. This was their patented process of ridding oneself of negative emotions. I was fine and didn't need any of their auditing, so I asked for my $500 back. They refused. So I went to a free legal aid service who made a phone call to Scientology, and they complied. This outfit has some good information, but their intent is questionable. They are actually very dark in nature when you see them on the real side. The real side, or a person's dream arena, is a place of a lot more freedom than the constricts of the physical world. One can see better a person's intent on the real side and save some time and grief in the long run. I was on a loose leash and without a salary and direct orders. I could come and go as I pleased in these groups as long as I reported once a month. The other group I investigated was Self-Realization Fellowship. I used to like to browse the metaphysical section of our local bookstore in Menlo Park, which was called Kepler's. Coming across the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, I was intrigued by his photograph on the cover. He appeared so calm, clear, and pure. I was immediately drawn to him. I read the book and joined SRF. The nearest temple they held their meditations at was an hour or so away in Orinda. I drove up there every weekend to sit and meditate and chant. They were good people, but my problem here was that I would have a hard time not falling asleep. It became so passive that I needed a more dynamic approach to what I was searching for. I even bought a small organ to accompany the chanting I did at home, but that still became a little old. A little story I remember from the book was told by Yogananda. His teacher in a long lineage of masters was Sri Yukasthar. Once Sri Yukasthar passed from this world, Yogananda was very sad. He would sit for long hours to meditate and yearn to see his master again. Finally, Sri Yukasthar came back to see Yogananda in a physical form and scolded him for having to take time away from his next mission, was to be a savior on another planet. This is a nice story and very real, but there is a lot more to life, and I needed to know. My next move was to try Christianity again. I say again because my parents raised me as a Lutheran. Around 80% of the Latvians claim to be Lutheran, although most of them are inherently backdoor animists. Animists are typically people who live with a strong belief in the supernatural or the unseen. They may believe that animals, trees, or rivers have spirits. Maybe that's why when Dwayne the Great Writer came along and introduced me to the idea that reality is unseen or unknown, it hit a chord within me and made a lot of sense. As a kid, my parents dragged me along to Latvian church services that were held once a month by a traveling Latvian pastor. The sermons were in Latvian and usually very dry and boring. I remember sitting in the pew between my parents, reading a book that I brought, with my dad on my left side, seething at the pastor whom he hated, and my mom on the right side, who many times cried during the address. I withstood those dry years the best I could. Attending San Jose State University in 1970, I found a campus Christian club that was very active and a lot more dynamic than the meditation in SRF. We held interesting discussions on the campus chapel, and the kids were fun. By this time, I had married my first wife, Jody, and we even traveled to a Billy Graham crusade in Dallas, Texas. During this time, I decided to read the Bible straight through to see what I could find. The only thing that happened was when I came to John chapter 14:21, which read, "He that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me, and will manifest myself to him." Well, right after reading this message, I heard a voice from within me saying, "Val." The tone was almost in a mocking way. Since then, I've become aware that the God of the Bible is another being who climbed his way to that position of governorship, just like anybody would climb their way into the presidency. He gets his kicks out of people worshiping and praying to him. He even grants someone's prayers now and then, just to give them hope, but keep them groveling at the same time. Okay, during this stage in my life, I did not report to my handler since Christianity was not an immediate interest to the department I was associated with, but I did get an opportunity to study medicine during this time. A number of government employees associated with the CIA met in a small house near the Stanford campus every week. Then we studied a lot of what the aliens do to extend their lives, what they have given the elites, and the basic herbal and ingenious-based health systems. Back to Kepler's again to see what people were saying about life, spirit, and God. This time, in the metaphysical section, I ran across a book that would change my life for the next 40 years. The book was called The Tiger's Fang, and the author was Paul Twitchell. I leafed through it at the store and decided right there I had to find a local center and join up right away. This was the early 1970s. Nothing I had come across had so much new knowledge and perspective. Everything else I had heard and read was the traditional wisdom and love ideas thrown around by most every group. Here was something that book took further. I hadn't even known there was a further. Here it is. I first met Dwayne Hefner, who was also a CIA asset, but working with remote viewing, alien contacts, and other psychic technology. We met once in a while to compare notes, but I didn't start working with him full-time until 2014, after he earned the position of the new man, and he invited me into his nonprofit organization. Anyway, Paul explained the different levels on the real side that his teacher, Rebizar Tars, took him through in order to recognize the isness, which he called the Sigmod at the time. The levels and governor gods on each level experienced were on the astral, causal, mental, and etheric levels. Each level is a vaster than the level below it. Paul coined the word Ekankar for his spiritual path. I studied all the monthly discourses, attended satsang classes and seminars, did my spiritual exercises, and contributed through teaching and missionary work. I had my ups and downs with the path, but generally I was content with what was being presented and where I was positioned. There was a point in my second marriage with Lydia where I thought I had to choose between Ekankar and our relationship. That was because Lydia had an animosity toward it. My decision was to quit Ekankar in favor of saving the relationship. In 6 months, though, the relationship failed anyway, and I rejoined Ekankar without losing the progress I'd made with my initiations. This is how Ekankar is set up now, in 2021, as I write this book. Ekankar offers a unique set of spiritual exercises and tools, a complete spiritual program. Books and discourses are a doorway to the secret inner teachings. The major steps in Ekankar's spiritual program are, first, stepping on the path of Ek by becoming a member of Ekankar. 2, accepting the second initiation in Ek, the link up with the Mahanta, the living Ek Master. 3, the opportunity for self-realization that comes with the 5th initiation. And ultimately, number 4, God realization, which can be reached in this lifetime through love and love alone. These days, the old path of Ekankar has been updated by life. Dwayne the Great Writer and the Real Guides. Life is not static. It's an isness, and it is always new now. People don't see this. They often hold to old traditions and wisdoms, thinking the old ways have value. They did at one time, but today is a new day, and realistically, one has to keep up with life. Dwayne says he has to update his resume constantly. Paul Twitchell was the babysitter. Ekankar was not set up to be the ultimate, just a step along the way. Paul set up many restrictions and guidelines because people have been versed in this sort of thing for lifetimes, and they feel comfortable being told what to do. Dwayne's is the college course. You have to figure it out for yourself. You are given the basic idea, but no one, including the real guides, can actually do it for you. so you are left to your own creativity. But you do have the best guidance on the planet with the real guides.